For 23 years, she was a ghost, a name carved into a memorial wall. But when a mysterious jet breached U.S. airspace, everything changed. The pilot inside wasn't the enemy, it was a legend thought lost forever. The sky over Da Nang was a dusty blue that morning, too quiet, too still. Captain Emma Gonzalez stood on the edge of the runway, helmet tucked under one arm, her other hand resting on the cool metal of her F-4 Phantom. The buzz of generators and the distant cough of jet engines filled the air, but inside her chest, there was only a heavy silence. She glanced toward the hangar. Lieutenant David Shaw, her wingman, was pacing near his own jet, glancing at her every few seconds. "You don't have to do this," he called over as she approached. Emma gave a faint smile. "Wouldn't be the first time I've flown alone, Shaw." He shook his head, stepping in close. "This route's hot. Intel's shaky. And command's pushing this too fast. You feel that?" She looked away for a second, toward the jungle far beyond the base fences, where the haze hovered thick and green. She did feel it. That gut-tightening sense that something wasn't right. But she wouldn't say it out loud. Not with half the crew watching. "My orders are clear," she said finally. "Low-altitude recon. Confirm the trail. In and out." Shaw dropped his voice. "I've flown with you long enough to know when you're bluffing. You don't like this." Emma's jaw tightened. She stepped back, tapped the side of her aircraft. "Then make sure I've got a warm beer waiting when I get back." A moment passed. Then Shaw reached into his vest pocket and handed her a small, folded photo. "Take it." Emma frowned. "What is it?" "My brother. He's just a kid. Been writing to me every week. Thought maybe you'd want something real to bring back." She hesitated, then tucked the photo into her flight suit. The pre-flight checks passed quickly. She climbed into the cockpit, the seat creaking beneath her as the canopy slid closed. Her fingers moved over switches from muscle memory. Lights flicked green across the panel. Shadow Hawk, cleared for departure, came the crackling voice-over comms. Emma's voice was steady. "Copy that. Wheels up in 30. The engines roared to life, a deep vibration running through her legs and spine. As she taxied forward, she gave one last look to Shaw, who stood just beyond the safety line. He raised 2 fingers in a small salute. She didn't wave back. Seconds later, her Phantom screamed down the runway and lifted into the thick, humid air, disappearing into the haze. Up there, above the tree line, it was beautiful. Endless green stretching to the horizon, clouds hanging low and fat like sleeping giants. But Emma kept her eyes locked on the radar, on the terrain, on the lines drawn in her mind. Something felt wrong. The sky was too still. The birds weren't moving. And her radio. A sudden crackle. Then nothing. She adjusted the dial. "Control, this is Shadow Hawk. Do you copy?" Static. Her pulse ticked up. Below her, something moved fast. Shadows in the trees. A flash of light. Her cockpit jolted. Alarms blared. She was hit. The world spun sideways. Captain Emma Gonzalez barely remembered pulling the eject handle. 1 second, her jet was screaming through the sky, then a bright flash, an explosion, and darkness swallowing everything. Her parachute cracked open mid-fall. Wind ripped past her face, sharp as knives. She squinted, trying to see the ground. Trees rushed up beneath her, dense, endless jungle. Whump. She hit hard. Branches clawed at her suit. Her shoulder slammed against a thick limb, spinning her as she dropped. Then the ground punched her back, and everything went still. She blinked, dazed, chest heaving. Her helmet had cracked. One side hung loose. Her body ached. Something in her leg didn't feel right. Birds squawked above. Insects buzzed around her ears. The jungle felt too alive, like it was watching her. She tried the radio on her vest. Shadow Hawk to command. Emergency downed. Coordinates unknown. Repeat. Static. Emma cursed under her breath. She pulled herself upright, limping slightly. Smoke curled up in the distance where her Phantom had gone down. If anyone saw the crash, they'd be heading that way. She pulled the small photo from her flight suit. Shaw's kid brother, holding a baseball glove and grinning like he had no idea what war was. She stared at it for a second, then tucked it back. She moved quickly, keeping low. Branches scraped her arms. Mud sucked at her boots. The heat wrapped around her like a wet blanket. Every step felt louder than it should. Then she heard it, voices. Foreign. Men. Armed. Close. Emma ducked behind a fallen tree, heart hammering. Through the leaves, she saw them. A group of militia fighters, not uniformed like NVA. Ragged clothes, strange gear. These weren't official soldiers. They were trackers. Hunters. She backed away slowly, heels slipping in mud. A branch cracked underfoot. Someone shouted. Gunfire tore through the trees. Emma ran. Limping, gasping. Shots echoed behind her. A round sliced past her arm, burning hot. She kept running until something slammed into her back. She hit the ground hard. Boots stomped around her. A rifle barrel pressed against her neck. Someone barked orders she didn't understand. She didn't move. Didn't speak. Her breathing was ragged. They pulled the gear from her, shouting. One of them kicked her radio away. 2 men dragged her to her feet. Her vision blurred, but she didn't cry. Didn't beg. She stared at the nearest man until he looked away. They tied her wrists and shoved her forward into the jungle. The trek lasted for hours. Through rivers, up slippery slopes, across tangled vines and biting insects. When they finally stopped, Emma saw it, a hidden camp, almost swallowed by the jungle. Wooden walls. Watchtower. Smoke rising from a cooking fire. She was shoved into a cage made of bamboo and metal scraps. The door slammed shut. A guard locked it without looking at her. Emma sat there, bleeding and sore, but eyes still sharp. Her hand went instinctively to her vest, empty now. She looked up at the sky, barely visible through the canopy. She wasn't dead. Not yet. 2 weeks after Captain Emma Gonzalez vanished, the war kept moving. Missions flew. Men died. The jungle kept swallowing planes and people alike. At Da Nang Air Base, Lieutenant David Shaw stood stiffly in front of the operations board, staring at her call sign, Shadow Hawk, still marked as MIA. Major Keller approached from behind. His voice was flat. It's time, Lieutenant. Command wants closure. Shaw didn't turn around. Closure. There's been no radio contact. No signals. The Vietnamese say they've found no wreckage. Intelligence is calling it unlikely. Shaw swallowed hard. She's not dead. Keller sighed, looking tired. I served with her too, David. But we've lost dozens this month. We can't hang on to ghosts. Later that day, a formal notice was signed. Emma Gonzalez was presumed Kia. Her personal effects, what little she had left on base, were packed into a small brown box. Her photo came down from the squadron wall. Her bunk was cleared. Back in the States, her mother received the folded flag and a typed letter with the official seal. Your daughter served with honor. Her sacrifice will never be forgotten. But the days went quiet. Calls from the base stopped. The war raged on. And Emma's name faded from the rotation. At a small military cemetery in New Mexico, a service was held. Only a handful attended. Her mother, a cousin, 2 former instructors from flight school. Shaw didn't come. He was still in Vietnam, flying missions. He couldn't watch a burial with no body. Instead, he sat alone in the Da Nang barracks that night, a bottle of whiskey half finished on the table. Emma's photo, one he kept hidden from others, sat beside him. A younger pilot, Lieutenant Collins, stepped in. Hey, Shaw. You all right? Shaw didn't look up. You ever fly with someone who made you better just by being in the air? Collins nodded slowly. Yeah. Shaw took a deep breath. She's still out there. Somewhere. I can feel it. Even if she is, Collins paused. They won't keep looking. Not this far in. Shaw didn't answer. He stared at the photo again, Emma, leaning against her jet, hair tied back, eyes squinting into the sun like she could see the future. Weeks turned into months. A memorial plaque was installed at the base. Her name etched into the wall, Captain Emma Gonzalez, USAF. Kia, Vietnam, 1972. And yet, deep in the jungle, Emma wasn't dead. She sat behind rusted bars, watching rain pour through the leaves, clutching pain in her side. Her flight suit was torn. Her boots were soaked. But her eyes were still sharp, still searching for a way out. One guard walked past, tossing her a bowl of thin rice soup. She didn't thank him. She didn't look away. She simply muttered, to herself, low and firm, "I'm not done yet." Rain was constant in the jungle. It slid down the bamboo bars, dripped from the edges of the rusty roof, and soaked the ground Emma Gonzalez slept on every night. The cage stank of mildew, sweat, and rotting leaves. She'd lost track of time, days blended together under the gray sky and thick jungle canopy. There was no sunrise, no calendar. Only the rhythm of guard shifts and the ache in her bones. Each morning, a bowl of rice or something that used to be soup was pushed through the bars. No words. No kindness. Just the same blank faces and rifles. Emma barely spoke. She conserved her strength. She'd learned early that shouting did nothing, pleading got you laughed at, and showing weakness brought more bruises. So she watched, waited, counted. Every day, she used a sharp rock to etch a line into a cracked plank beside her sleeping mat. Over time, the lines grew into a wall of quiet defiance, hundreds of them. Sometimes she thought of Shaw, of that last moment before takeoff. The two-finger salute. The folded photo of his little brother she'd tucked into her suit. Gone now. Lost in the crash or taken by the guards. Still, she remembered the boy's face clearly, his crooked smile, the worn-out glove. She told herself stories in her head. About getting out. About walking into a base one day and saluting the flag again. About the silence breaking with her voice calling home. Once, long ago, there had been another prisoner in the next cage, a Navy pilot named Riley. He'd survived 6 months before a fever took him. His cough still echoed in her memory. After he died, they never brought in another. She was alone now. The last ghost in this forgotten place. A young guard named Bao sometimes lingered outside her cage. He didn't speak much English, but his eyes weren't cruel. One night, he tossed her an old paperback, a water-damaged copy of Mice and Men. No explanation. Just slid it under the bars and walked away. She read it twice. Then again. The pages stuck together and smelled like mold, but the words still lived. Her hair had gone short and uneven. Her flight suit was patched together with thread from old sacks. Her ribs showed more than they should, but her spine never bent. She'd lost weight, lost years, but not herself. One night, lightning cracked across the jungle, loud and sudden. She sat up. Something was burning far off, an orange glow rising above the trees. She heard shouting, gunfire in the distance, a whistle of something heavy falling. Guards ran across the compound, yelling orders. The earth shook slightly beneath her. Emma stood, pressing her face to the bamboo bars, eyes locked on the fire in the trees. Something had changed. The fire didn't come with warning, it came with wind. Sometime after midnight, a dry lightning strike hit the trees east of the compound. Flames rose fast, licking up the trunks like they'd been waiting years to burn. The jungle, soaked most days, was brittle that week. Captain Emma Gonzalez woke to smoke curling through the bars of her cage, thick and bitter. She coughed, sitting up. Heat pressed against her skin like a wall. Outside, chaos had already begun. Guards were shouting in Vietnamese, some running with buckets, others grabbing gear. A few were already gone, vanished into the trees with packs over their shoulders. She saw Bao, the quiet young guard, trying to douse flames near the storage hut with a blanket. Futile. The orange glow grew brighter. Her cage creaked as she leaned against it. The bamboo joints were drying, cracking. Years of moisture undone in minutes. One corner had started to split near the base. Her heart picked up. She grabbed the loose stone she always kept hidden under her mat. The one she used to etch the marks on the wall. Hands shaking, she jammed it into the bamboo joint and began to pry. Snap. Crack. Footsteps pounded past. No one stopped. No one noticed her. Another guard yelled. Something crashed behind the latrine huts. Then came the scream, loud, raw, and then silence. The bottom of the cage split enough for her to slide one leg through. She didn't hesitate. Emma crawled out, every muscle in her body screaming. Her bare feet hit the earth. Smoke stung her eyes. She darted behind a supply barrel, crouched, watching. No alarm. No chase. The guards were focused on saving themselves. She moved. Low and fast, she ran through the back of the camp, weaving between crumbling sheds and half-burnt crates. The world was orange and black, fire above, ash falling like snow. Somewhere behind her, a structure collapsed with a roar. A small path opened behind the eastern fence. She'd memorized it years ago, but never had the chance to use it. Until now, she slipped into the jungle. The first breath of clean air hit her lungs like a gift. She didn't stop. Branches slapped her face. Vines tangled her feet. She ran for hours, following the slope of the land, always heading west. No water, no food. Just the need to put as much distance as possible between her and that camp. By dawn, her legs gave out. She dropped to her knees near a muddy stream, cupping her hands and drinking deep. When she looked up, something caught her eye, a strange line of trees, spaced too perfectly. Man-made. She limped toward them and saw it. An old airstrip. Hidden. Overgrown. Silent. At the far end, swallowed by vines and moss, sat a shape she hadn't seen in years. A fighter jet rusted, forgotten, but still standing. Her breath caught. She stepped forward, slow and steady, eyes locked on it. And for the first time in 23 years, she felt hope. The jet looked like a skeleton from a war long buried. Paint peeled off in strips. Vines had wrapped themselves around the wings. One of the landing gears had sunk halfway into the ground. But it was there, a McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom. Same model Emma had flown before the crash. Older than her now, but still standing. Emma stood in front of it like she'd found a ghost. She placed a hand on the metal. Cold. Rough. But real. Still here, she whispered, as if talking to an old friend. She climbed the ladder that barely held together and dropped into the cockpit. Her body groaned from exhaustion, cuts, bruises, and years of wear, but her hands moved like they remembered. Switches. Levers. Instruments. Most were dead. Some rusted. But the layout, it was all there. She could feel the muscle memory coming back, like an old rhythm playing in her bones. Okay, she muttered. Let's see what you've got left. She popped open the side panel, and her jaw tensed. Inside, tucked away and sealed in old canvas, were spare parts, cables, and even a toolkit. Someone had stored them. Maybe the last pilot who used this place. Maybe a crew who planned to return. But no one ever did. Emma knew the odds were brutal. The jet would need fuel, air pressure, engine checks, and most likely luck that defied logic. But she had nothing else. No maps. No radio. Just this jet and the stubborn voice in her head that said, "Go home." For the next 2 days, she didn't stop. She scavenged wires from old huts and radios, drained fuel from rusted barrels hidden near the trees, patched a broken line with jungle vine and glue made from boiled sap. She ate roots and drank from the stream, slept only when her hands started shaking too much to work. She didn't talk, didn't cry, just worked. She remembered the checklist, not by memory, but from feeling. From routine burned into her all those years ago. Fuel valve, check. Altimeter, dead. Doesn't matter. Hydraulics, she paused, tapping the panel, maybe. The engine was the worst. Covered in nests, rats, and rust, it took nearly an entire day to clear out. She almost gave up when a bird startled her, and she dropped her only wrench into a puddle. But she found it, and kept going. Finally, on the 4th morning, she sat back in the pilot seat. Her hands rested on the control stick. She looked up at the sky, blue and wide. Home was out there, somewhere past the clouds, past the ocean, past decades of silence. "I don't care if I fall out of the sky," she said softly. "I'm not dying here." She flipped the starter switch. For a moment, nothing. Then, a cough. A shake. A slow, painful rumble. Her eyes widened. The engine coughed again, then roared. A deep rumble broke across the sky above California's southern coast. Radar screens lit up at a nearby U.S. Air Force Operations Center. A technician frowned, then looked up at his commanding officer. "Unidentified aircraft." Low altitude. Moving fast. No transponder. No response to hails. The colonel stood still. Military jet? Appears to be. Model. Old. Like Vietnam-era old. The colonel didn't flinch. Where's it headed? Toward restricted airspace, sir. Over Travis. The colonel didn't wait. Scramble 2 F-35s. Rules of engagement apply. If that bird won't respond, we treat it as hostile. Above the Pacific, Emma's hands gripped the stick tighter than she remembered. The jet bucked and rattled beneath her like a beast barely alive. Warning lights blinked. Altitude readings were off. Her left panel was mostly dead. But she was flying. Clouds peeled past her like ghosts. The air was thinner than she remembered. The horizon stretched open, so familiar it hurt. Home. She didn't know what country she was over. Maybe Thailand. Maybe Taiwan. But she kept flying east. Always east. Suddenly, 2 black dots appeared in her periphery. Fast. Sharp. Too clean to be anything from her world. F-35s. New models. Sleek and modern like something out of a dream she never had. Emma instinctively reached for her radio. She turned the knobs, trying to get through. Nothing. She banged the side of the panel. Still nothing. She looked out at the fighters. They were close now. One peeled off and shot ahead. The other held back, angling for position. She saw the missile pods under its wings. She knew what this meant. They didn't know who she was. And from their side, she looked like an antique heading for sensitive airspace. Emma waved her arm from the canopy. Pointless. She grabbed a piece of broken mirror from the cockpit side panel and flashed sunlight toward them. Primitive. Desperate. But maybe enough to delay them. Inside the F-35 cockpit, Lieutenant Ethan Cole glanced at the targeting system. Target acquired. Old Phantom. No response. Orders. His wingman, Lieutenant Jamie Park, stayed on radio. She's not responding. Ignoring all channels. Orders are to prepare to fire if she crosses the base perimeter. Copy. Ethan's thumb hovered near the trigger. Then static. A garbled voice came through. Shadow Hawk. Sierra 87 Delta. Jamie's eyes shot wide. Wait, what did you say? Ethan looked confused. You heard that too? That's a training code. From orientation. Used in old case studies. Missing pilot scenarios. Impossible. More static, then again. Request vector, home. Ethan's hands dropped from the controls. Sir, we might have a situation, Jamie called over comms. This could be her. The Captain Emma Gonzalez. Far ahead, Emma watched as the lead fighter eased off its aggressive posture. The second plane pulled closer, this time, not for attack, but for contact. Emma's heart pounded. They hadn't fired. They heard her. She wasn't a ghost anymore. The Pacific sun had begun to dip when Lieutenant Jamie Park pulled her F-35 alongside the aging Phantom jet. She had never seen anything like it in the sky. Weathered panels, chipped gray paint, USAF markings nearly worn off by decades of sun and war. This jet had no business flying in 2025. And yet, it was. Inside, she could see the silhouette of a pilot helmeted, but not modern gear. The cockpit glass was slightly fogged, scratched. But there was something in the way the pilot moved slow, steady, experienced. Jamie squinted, voice crackling over secure comms. She's real. Lieutenant Ethan Cole kept formation just behind. Still no transponder ping. But she's not hostile. Look at her hands. She's signaling with mirror flashes. No weapons armed. Jamie adjusted her visor and zoomed in on the canopy. She's old school. Maybe late 40s or 50s, but that uniform patch, wait. Jamie blinked. I've seen that patch before. In training. In the archives. Ethan flipped open his helmet HUD and pulled up a legacy squadron list. He scrolled, jaw slowly going slack. Blackbird Division. Lost over Vietnam, 1972. Name, Captain Emma Gonzalez. Status, Kia, presumed lost behind enemy lines. Last contact was July 2nd. Jamie looked again at the woman flying next to her. Ethan, that's her. It's her. Same patch. Same code call. Everything matches. Silence filled the channel. Ethan finally muttered, "This is impossible." In the Phantom, Emma watched the sleek black jet edge closer. She could see the pilot now, a young woman, maybe in her 20s. Helmeted, alert, eyes wide behind the visor. The kind of look Emma had seen in dozens of rookie flyers long ago. Emma gave a half wave. Awkward. Hopeful. The young pilot gave a small nod, slow, respectful. Almost like she knew. Emma couldn't hear the words, but she could feel it in the way they moved. Something had changed. They weren't aiming to shoot her down anymore. They were flying beside her, like wingmen. For the first time in years, Emma exhaled. A tear ran down her cheek and dried in the warm cabin air. At the Air Defense Command Center, alarms had turned into astonished silence. General Ross, a grizzled veteran in his late 60s, stood motionless as a technician replayed the intercepted voice line. "Shadowhawk. Sierra 87 Delta." Ross sat down hard. "I know that voice," he muttered. "I trained under her back in '79. This can't be real." The room watched as the radar showed all 3 aircraft, 2 F-35s, and 1 Ghost from history, turning gently toward the base. "She's coming home," Jamie's voice reported through comms. "You better have someone ready to believe the unbelievable." The Phantom's wheels screeched as they touched the runway at Nellis Air Force Base. The old bird wobbled, almost groaning from decades of silence, but Captain Emma Gonzalez held it steady. Her hands were trembling not from fear, but from something deeper. Memory. Ghosts. Hope. The moment her canopy popped open, soldiers and airmen surrounded the jet, weapons lowered but eyes sharp. Jamie and Ethan landed seconds later, stepping out of their F-35s and rushing over. Emma slowly unbuckled herself. Her legs, stiff and sore, protested every movement. But she stood tall as she climbed down the ladder. Dust and wind swirled across the tarmac. No one said a word. Then General Ross stepped forward. Emma froze. Her breath caught in her throat. He was older, white-haired, heavy-set, but his face hadn't changed. "Not really." "Captain." "Emma Gonzalez," he asked, voice breaking slightly. Emma's voice cracked. "Mitch Ross." He nodded, then chuckled, almost embarrassed. "I was a cadet. You gave me hell in ground training." Emma's lip quivered. She gave a quiet, surprised laugh. "You were awful at navigation." A few of the airmen smiled. The tension cracked like old ice. General Ross took a step closer, voice lowering. "Where have you been, ma'am?" Emma looked around at the sea of modern tech, unfamiliar uniforms, and stunned expressions. The air felt different here. Lighter, freer, but also foreign. She looked him dead in the eye. "I was shot down over Laos. Captured. Held for years. Then hidden when the regime changed. Forgotten. You weren't listed as a POW. Only MIA. "I know," she said quietly. "They told me the war was over. That the US left us behind. So I waited. I adapted. I escaped when I could." Ross's jaw clenched. "Why no?" Emma's eyes misted over. "Because I heard your pilots on the radio. And they heard me. They recognized the code. The call sign you taught them." She looked over at Jamie and Ethan. "That's how I knew someone still remembered." Inside the debriefing room, Emma sipped water like it was gold. She sat wrapped in an old green blanket while military intelligence officers scribbled notes, reviewed maps, and asked quiet questions. Emma told them everything, at least, everything she could remember clearly. About the camp, the other prisoners, the long silence, the failed rescue attempt in '75, the men who didn't make it, the name she hadn't spoken aloud in 20 years, Daniel. Jamie watched from the back, eyes wide, heart aching. This wasn't just a ghost story. It was real. And it wasn't over. Later that night, Emma stood alone outside, looking up at the stars. The wind was cool, the silence comforting. But behind her, she heard footsteps. Jamie stepped up quietly. She didn't speak at first, just stood beside her. Finally, she asked, "Do you want to go home?" Emma smiled, faint but sure. "Yeah, I think I finally do." 2 weeks later, Emma stood at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C. The sky was overcast, the air cool. Tourists and veterans passed by quietly, some placing flowers, others just staring at names carved in black granite. Jamie walked beside her, hands in her jacket pockets, glancing at Emma now and then, but letting her lead. Emma's fingers traced the wall until she found it, Captain Emma Gonzalez. Her own name, etched like a tombstone. She stood there a long moment. A nearby veteran in a faded army cap looked over and blinked, confused. He nudged his wife. "Is that?" Emma gave a soft smile and nodded. "They thought I was gone." Jamie whispered, "They're going to fix it, right?" Emma chuckled. "I kind of like it. Let it stay. A reminder." Jamie frowned. "A reminder of what?" "That sometimes the truth takes a while to land." They kept walking. Back at the base, Emma was shown a decommissioned Phantom jet in a hangar, weathered and gutted. She stepped toward it slowly, running her fingers along its metal skin. "This model was flown by you folks," said a mechanic. "Back when jets had guts and pilots had instincts." Emma smirked. "Still does. Still do." Behind her, General Ross entered. "Thought you might want to see what's being restored in your honor." Emma turned. "In my honor? You're being awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross and a ceremony's planned. The president himself's curious about you." She laughed. "Curious or suspicious?" "Bit of both," he admitted. "But mostly grateful." Emma grew quiet. "Then, what about Daniel, my co-pilot?" Ross nodded solemnly. "We've reopened records. Started searching for remains in the regions you described. You may have given his family the closure they never got." Emma swallowed hard. "That matters." At the ceremony, cameras flashed. Reporters whispered. The world now knew her name, the pilot who disappeared and returned. She stood at the podium in a new USAF dress uniform, her posture straight, her voice steady. "I survived because I believe someone would still care. That this uniform meant something. That the flag still flew for me, even when I couldn't see it." Applause erupted. But it was the quiet, respectful nods from old veterans in the front row that hit hardest. Later that evening, Emma visited a flight school. Jamie had invited her to speak with young cadets. The classroom fell silent as Emma entered. "Okay," she said, grinning. "Who here thinks flying is just about fancy gear and cool call signs?" Laughter broke out. Emma's tone softened. "It's about never forgetting who you are, even when the world thinks you're gone." She looked at Jamie, who beamed with pride. That night, Emma finally returned to her small hometown in Texas. A yellow ribbon still fluttered on the oak tree out front. Her old neighbor, now white-haired and slow, came out onto the porch and gasped. "Emma? Is it really you?" She nodded. "It's me, Mrs. Turner." The world had changed. But so had she. Some wounds would never fully heal. But in the quiet between jet engines and gunfire, she found peace. Captain Emma Gonzalez had come home. And this time for good.